Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thank you particularly to the organizers of this conference. I would like to congratulate SIforAGE for what it has achieved. We're going to hear a lot more about that in a little while. And as was already revealed in the quotations that were kindly read a moment ago, I'm not going to repeat that aging is the biggest game changer on the planet, but it is certainly the case. And what I want to do is to talk about why everything about aging is changing and how this connects to the important agenda of this conference. So let's start by looking at the history of increase in life expectancy. This is an extraordinary story and an extraordinary graph, and it was published a few years ago in the top journal Science by two of the world's leading historical demographers. And what it shows is that over the last 200 years, life expectancy around the world has been increasing at a remarkably rapid pace in an extraordinarily linear manner. The line is almost absolutely straight. No one knows why it should be a straight line. It simply is. The way the graph was prepared was it was clever because there's a lot of data, but each data point in the graph shows for that year what was the life expectancy in what in that year was the longest living country in the world. Many, many people, and even many scientists still, believe that aging is programmed. They think we must have a genetic program for aging. If we didn't have genetic programs for aging, the world would be full of animals and people that didn't die and lie down and make space for the next generation. So, of course, you need a program for aging. But what the numbers I showed you on the previous graph and what looking at the natural world tells us is that it just doesn't work like that. If you go out into the countryside and you look for old animals, you never find them. And the reason you don't find them is that animals in nature die young. They die because the mortality pressure in the wild is very high. So studies have been done, for example, of mice living in the wild, and you find that 95% of mice in the wild are dead before their first birthday. Bring those mice into your home, adopt them as a pet. Not a good idea to try to adopt wild mice, but if you have mice, if you have them in a laboratory, you find that mice can live 3 years. In nature, they never get anywhere near that. And this actually leads us to an understanding of aging because it says that, no, the body is not programmed to die. There would be no point in a program for death. The body is programmed for survival. But given that in the natural world you're not going to live very long, it never makes sense for our genomes to invest in the maintenance and repair systems that might give the body the potential to live indefinitely. So research on individual aging trajectories, we know that there's great diversity in how people age, and we would like to be able to understand better why it is that some people seem to follow a more fortunate trajectory into old age than others. So this was something that I became interested in many years ago. Genes are thought to be important. I told you that aging process is not programmed in the sense there are no genes that act to kill us, but longevity is programmed. And studies, big studies, particularly in Scandinavia, where there are excellent population registries, show that genes explain about 1/4 of what determines the length of an individual life. So genes are important to the extent that it's 1/4, which is a significant fraction. But remember, it's only one of 4 quarters. So if you don't come from a long-lived family, you shouldn't be too gloomy about it, because you still have 3 quarters with which you can work. Nutrition is very important in many, many ways, and we're still learning a great deal more about nutrition. In Europe, we talk a lot about the Mediterranean diet. So here in Barcelona, having enjoyed a wonderful dinner last night, I can really appreciate the life-enhancing benefits of the Mediterranean diet. Physical activity is of enormous importance, and we're learning all the time how physical activity can actually maintain health for significantly longer periods. And one of the exciting things we're learning about this is that even if you're very old, even if you're compromised, even if you're experiencing parts of the syndrome of frailty, is that physical activity can have powerful health-maintaining, even rejuvenatory effects. Now, we found many, many things. We've published well over 100 papers, and we're publishing, probably 20 papers a year, 20 to 30 papers a year still from this. We've got a lot of data still to work with. One of the things we found was that, the popular perception of older people is that, anyone so old as 85 is going to be a bundle of misery and, so lots and lots of illnesses and grumbling and grumbling and grumbling about all the problems that confront them. And we thought it would be interesting to find out just how many illnesses people at age 85 have. So we were able, from the assessments we made from the review of records, to determine for each individual whether they had or did not have any of 18 different age-related illnesses. And this graph shows the distribution of the numbers of illnesses that people had. Now, the disappointing thing of this is that at age 85, 3/4 of the population, and this was a completely representative population. It was not a volunteer population. People agreed on being approached, so it was representative of all socioeconomic classes. It included people in care homes. It included people with dementia. So this shows a very accurate representation of the health spectrum. 75% of people had 4 or more age-related illnesses, which is quite a lot. So it was interesting when we asked them to self-rate their health and quality of life, in spite of having all these illnesses. 78% of them, that's nearly 4 out of every 5, self-rated their health as being good, very good, or excellent. And this is interesting, it's encouraging, it tells us that although there is a lot of multimorbidity in the population, that's reasonably well managed. The other thing we looked at was disability. And just as with diseases, we looked at 17 different activities of daily living. Can you cook for yourself? Can you shop for yourself? Can you manage your finances? All these things. Can you cut your own toenails? Which is a very revealing question, actually. And this shows the distribution here of the number of things with which people had difficulty, the activities they could not perform. And what is striking here is this enormous diversity. And particularly interesting was that 1/4 of the men and 1/6 of the women could do it all. They had no functional limitation of any kind at age 85. So much so that we had to change the title of the paper when we were preparing it for publication, because we had called it Disability and Dependency in the 85-plus population. And we had to change it to Capability and Dependency, because that seemed better to fit with what we were observing. A few years ago, I was involved with the Government Office for Science in a foresight project that was called Mental Capital and Well-Being, and I was tasked with leading the component of this project that looked at mental capital through life. Mental capital was a term that was developed for this project, and what it means is the totality of your cognitive abilities, but also your emotional resilience, your capacity to work for a deferred goal, your capacity to form meaningful relationships with others around you. It's a broad concept, but it still has real power. And we found it useful in this to present mental capital as a trajectory across the life course, rising through childhood, reaching a kind of plateau. We try to keep it as high as possible during adulthood, and then declining into old age. So this was the framing of how we did our work. I just saw this cartoon recently, which amused me, so the exhortation here is not to be an aging dinosaur. Let's all get on board the boat, and SIforAGE is a very good example of the kind of vessel on which we need to voyage into the future. So with that, I'll stop and thank you for your attention.